Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Pitchsidepodcast. I am your host, the HOD of the PSP. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Enable notifications to receive all the updates from these episodes of the podcast and all the content on the channel, of course, which you can listen to on Spotify, Google Podcasts or any other platform, and follow us on social media, so at PSP on Twitter, Pitchsidepod on Instagram, and welcome to episode 111 of the podcast. Join us some more, you are welcome. Before we talk about the main subjects of the episode, really talking about the international break and the injuries and all of that, and then of course the potential transfer of Ibrahima Konate to Liverpool, let's start from the, one of the most breaking stories of the last 24 hours in the world of football, and officially Manchester City announced that they are letting, really letting Sergio Aguero leave the club on the end of his contract this summer with the club. He's a legendary player, really, for Man City when you consider everything he done for the club. He joined them in July 2011, and he spent, he's going to, by the end of his contract, spend a decade at that club, really, and he was one of the most revered strikers, I think, of the Premier League, scoring 257 goals, 73 assists for Manchester City in all competitions, including 181 goals in the Premier League, as one of the highest top scorers, one of the highest goal scorers of the Premier League ever, with Manchester City, becoming, I think, a cult hero, I think, in their club, really, with the transformation that happened in it. I was lucky enough to watch him with Atletico Madrid before joining Manchester City. He's an incredible player. Maybe he wasn't exactly, on fire with Atletico Madrid, but definitely people would remember him for his stint at Manchester City, for his 10 years at Manchester City, and also, maybe most importantly of all, the highlight of his career would be the goal in the 93rd minute in the 2012-2013 season against, or 2011-2012 season against Queen's Park Rangers in the last minute to save and to win, to clinch the Premier League title for Manchester City. Probably that's going to be the highlight of his career, the Aguero with a lot of O's kind of goal from Martin Tyler and all of that. It would definitely be the highlight of his career at Manchester City. He was an incredible player for the club, definitely gave them everything, really. Again, scoring goals, linking up. He was one of the best strikers of the Premier League, and leaving Man City at the end of the year is an interesting proposition for the 32-year-old Argentine, because there's a lot of teams that are going to be willing to sign him, for free. I mean, Barcelona is a potential sort of destination. There's Man United, Chelsea. We're talking that's in the Premier League. Man United and Chelsea, of course. Barcelona maybe would want him outside of the Premier League. We talk about maybe Inter Milan would want him. We will see how things will be going. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see where he lands after this massive stint at Man City, after this 10-year tenure at Man City, where everybody thought he's going to stay there till the end of his career, because he's going to become synonymously intrigued with Man City. He's going to be really linked with Man City. Like, people, when think of Sergio Aguero, people would think of Man City. Definitely they would think of that goal against Queen's Park Rangers and all the other memories and the highlights and the brilliant individual performances for him in the Premier League and all of that. And people would, definitely mourn him for his career in Man City if he eventually leaves the Premier League. But if he stays in the Premier League, it would be interesting to see who's going to get him. And I think, if Chelsea get him, that's going to be a huge coup, by the way. Yes, he's 32, but I think if they keep him fit, it could be a good, experienced player to help them, like a la Olivier Giroud, really, at the moment in the club. And he could be a really good goal scorer. He could get some decent numbers, even at his age. He could get some decent numbers. Maybe he would get them like 10, 15 goals next season if he's kept fit. Unfortunately, this season hasn't been exactly good. Only 8 appearances so far in the Premier League for him, and only 1 goal. Didn't participate in the Champions League, which was, weird enough in its own right for Aguero, and of course fitness issues. He had COVID-19 issues before early on in the season, so it wasn't exactly the greatest end or the greatest finale to Aguero's stint at Man City, but definitely people will remember him, and the club would remember him because they announced that they will make a statue for him. I just wanted to, throw in a couple of words in there about Sergio Aguero, and then, of course, we're going to be moving on to our main subject, of course, again, his leaving Man City from the, from the back door, pretty much, not winning the Champions League, which is something he vowed to do. And of course, but he definitely has a lot of Premier League winners' medals and FA Cup medals, Carabao Cup medals, top goal scorers, golden boots. I mean, he did it all with Man City except the big one. But hopefully, he will finish his career in, on better terms. Really, let's face it, in another club. Let's move on now to more interesting and more maybe up-to-date, really, subject, and then talking about the career of some players, and of course, it is the return of the European qualifiers for the World Cup. It is round 3 of those qualifiers. Really, is going to be taking place today, and some interesting encounters. Really, in this one, not really big name encounters, but definitely there's some couple of pieces here, and their Group A, E, G, and H are taking place today. Azerbaijan facing Serbia in Group A, Luxembourg facing Portugal, of course. And, it is going to be interesting, really, from both sides. Definitely after the debacle that was the game against Serbia with the whole late goal and all of that, I think Portugal would definitely want to win this game in a pretty convincing fashion against Luxembourg, who shockingly defeated Ireland away from home. So you can only imagine how the game is going to be, how hard the game is going to be when it's going to be played in Luxembourg, and, potentially in front of fans, who knows. What's gonna be happening for Serbia? Probably is gonna be an easy win against Azerbaijan, depending what's gonna happen. And of course, in the other game, of course, there's Ireland are not gonna be playing. It's gonna be friendly for them against Qatar, in home, of course. In Group E, it is Belgium versus Belarus, and Wales facing Czech Republic. I think for Belgium, after the draw last time out against Czech Republic, which I think, as I mentioned in reviewing that particular match in the podcast episodes before, I really think that Czech Republic were the better side, and maybe there could be a thorn in their side when it comes to qualifying to the World Cup. I'm not saying necessarily they would take the top spot, but definitely they will annoy them on the way to taking that top spot. Is going to be a hard time for Belgium trying to contain the Czech Republic side, both away from home in that first game, which they struggled already, and in the home fixture, which is going to be taking place later down the line. So for Wales and Czech Republic, I think this is going to be the game where everybody looks at this game and says this is a game for the second place. But I really fancy Czech Republic, by the way, because looking and watching both games for Wales against Belgium and Czech Republic against Belgium, I really fancy Czech Republic. Not because they have more superstar players than Wales or something like that. I mean, they have the likes of Gareth Bale, Daniel James, and, Harry Wilson. They're not exactly the worst of things you could have. They have Roldan in Tottenham. I mean, they have a pretty good bone of a team. I mean, they're missing Anna Ramsey for injury, but that's life in the international breaks. Czech Republic, I think, is a much compact side, a much physically ready side. They conserved their energy in the first game against Estonia, beating them 6-2. Pretty much, on first gear, and then they forced Belgium to, settle for the draw and almost took all 3 points. I fancy them against Wales, really, and I really think that if any team in this whole group is going to stand up to Belgium and really annoy them in the process of qualifying, I think it's going to be Czech Republic, already top of the group ahead of Belgium, and it's going to be really interesting to see how things pan out, because if they both win today, it's going to be Czech Republic still on top of that group, ahead of Belgium, depending on the situation, of course. And, it will be really, really starting to worry the number 1 ranked team in the world. In Group G, it is the group, of course, of Netherlands, Norway, and Turkey. Gibraltar hosting Netherlands, and, of course, the first game against Turkey, where they succumbed to a shocking result and a shocking performance in its own right. And then, of course, a revitalizing victory against Latvia. This should be another revitalizing victory. This should be another easy job for Netherlands, to get the 3 points again and maybe build a bit of confidence, because it's not looking good for the Dutch side under Frank de Boer at the moment. Montenegro hosts Norway, and this is not going to be easy for the Norwegian side, who I mean, we built a lot of expectations for this Norwegian side, with of course, led by Erling Haaland, and having the likes of Ødegaard and having the likes of Soloth and all of that. But definitely, they were not up to the task so far. The first game against Gibraltar wasn't exactly... I mean, the first game against Gibraltar wasn't exactly easy. Against Latvia, wasn't exactly easy. They won 3-0, but it wasn't easy. And then the second game against Turkey, they didn't really show up a great performance, and, they lost 3-0 by, I think, a better team overall. I mean, this should be a tough game for them against a side in Montenegro that are not going to be given up. They already have 6 points, Montenegro, from 2 games, so it's going to be interesting to see that if how they're going to be playing. They would believe in their chances, really, of making it at least to the playoff system, if not, shock the world, really, and qualify directly to the World Cup in the top spot. And in the last game, of course, it's Turkey versus Latvia, and I don't think we would disagree if I tell you that it should be 3 points in the bag for the Turkish side, because it definitely is an easy task for them, beaten to drubs by both Norway and Netherlands, not scoring any goal so far for Latvia, and it should be a pretty easy situation, I would say, for the Turkish side to defeat Latvia in this group. In Group H, Cyprus hosts Slovenia, Croatia hosts Malta, and Slovakia hosts Russia. Not exactly the most enticing of games in that group, but overall, it's going to be an interesting night, especially for Belgium and Portugal. Carrying on with the international break vibes, and we have to talk really about something that creeps in and shows up every time there is an international break. And I think it's even doubly true now with the situation with the pandemic, the travel restrictions, the problems of the sort of overall restrictions because of the pandemic in different countries. But of course, we're not talking about that at all. I mean, that in its own right is a whole bee's nest that shouldn't be touched, really, and we could not get into in details until other time. But we're talking about the injuries, really, for the players. And, there's a lot of injuries around them. I mean, of course, mostly it is in Europe, because realistically, aside from them, I mean, in Europe there is Africa, but that's an African Cup of Nations qualifiers. I mean, somehow it is less demanding than the World Cup qualifiers, because those are really because the ones in Africa, the qualifiers in Africa, are really done and dusted by now. It's only the last couple of rounds, so really everything is set and done. But for the World Cup qualifiers in Europe, this is the first 3 fixtures, and in 10 days. And you have the matter of this, hectic sort of international schedule with 3 matches and, some serious travels to be made. I mean, the likes of, France going to Kazakhstan, or Poland going to Andorra. There's a whole host of issues again in this international break. And of course, the voices and the sounds of people saying they should completely take off, completely deny this international break, not make it happen a la South America because of the travel restrictions and all of that, and the raging pandemic, and I think rightfully so, and understandably so. But on the one hand, for South America, by the way, between parentheses, that is going to be making the next international break a little bit more, sort of, congested and a little bit more hectic than normal, because whenever the next international break is going to happen in South America, or they're going to be scheduling the qualifiers for that, it's going to be either scheduled before Copa America or after Copa America, and that is in its own right is going to be really, really, really hard. And of course, speaking of Copa America, you will have Copa America in between, so you need to think about that as well for your restrictions. But definitely, there's a lot of concern about the big teams, and there's certain teams, I think in particular, that are really concerned about the international break. I think mainly it's down to the 8 teams left in both the Champions League and the Europa League. I mean, mostly it's for the Champions League teams, because those guys are mostly competing for league titles in their own countries. And of course, I mean, probably aside from the English trio, I would say in Chelsea, Liverpool, and Man City, I mean, for Man City, they're competing for a quadruple, not just for one title, so they have to be worried. I think they have just more than just one players. They pretty much have the entire first squad in the international break. I think aside from Ederson, they have Ruben Dias, they have João Cancelo, Bernardo Silva, all in Portugal. They have Zinchenko with Ukraine. They have John Stones with England. They have Rodri with Spain. I mean, although the Spanish squad overall is not exactly concerned, because mostly it's from the Spanish sides. Only a couple of players from outside of Spain, really, when you look at it. And mostly, except for Real Madrid, there's no Spanish side else playing in Europe at the moment, unless it's Granada. And I'm sure Granada doesn't have national team players in it. So realistically speaking, Spain have no worries about that. But mostly it comes down to, I think, 3 or 4 teams really who have a lot of players. Almost that entire first squad is in international breaks. You have Bayern Munich. The whole squad of Bayern Munich, the whole first team of Bayern Munich is an international break, except for Thomas Müller. The whole first squad for Man City is an international break. I think maybe aside from the aside from South Americans, in Ederson, Jesus, Aguero, and all of that. And then you have PSG as well, who have a lot of players on international break. Of course, you have Kimpembe, you have Verratti, you have Paredes, you have Kimpembe, Verratti, Florenzi. I mean, the South Americans, of course, are really lucky to not have that. Idrissa Gueye with Senegal also having that. So it will be interesting to see how the international break is going to be hampering the rest of the season, and definitely coming at a time where we're talking about the Champions League, the business end of the Champions League, the quarterfinals. Lewandowski is in Poland, of course, picked up an injury. Verratti and Florenzi picked up an injury in Italy. You have Cruz picked up an injury in the German camp. You have maybe potentially other players going to pick up injuries. Who knows what could happen in the next couple of days, really, in the third fixture of the European qualifiers. I mean, and of course, and I think a lot of people have been critical of these international breaks, but I think those big teams will voice their worries more than any other about their teams. I mean, Lewandowski is now already injured, and his injury is going to be requiring rest for 5 to 10 days, so potentially he's going to be missing out on the first leg of the Champions League quarterfinal. That is going to be worrying for Bayern Munich to not have him in this first game, and not just that, but also the game against Leipzig in the Bundesliga to decide the title. So overall, those big teams are causing, the international break is causing for them a lot of concern, and they rightfully so. I think they should be concerned, particularly Man City, I would say, because they're playing for a quadruple, they're playing for everything, so they need their players as much fit as possible. But you cannot tell the players no, really. I mean, if the players want to play for the national team, and I'm sure most of them would, I'm really not sure how they could deny them. I mean, injuries are not exactly exclusive to international breaks. They happen throughout the whole season. Sometimes they happen in needless club games, really, in needless league games, cup games, or even preparations before the season. So injuries happen every time, all season long, and there is no absolute exclusivity to them in the international break. Although, again, in a pandemic, it's not just the injuries now, it's the injuries, COVID-19, which may cause a little bit more of a sort of setback when it comes to rehabilitation for the players, recovery time for those players from, compared to another injury. Because when you have COVID, you're going to be isolated for 10 to 15 days normally, and you're not going to be training like normal, players would train. So that would need a little bit of recovery, and you need to be a little bit of extra work on the fitness of the players once they return from their COVID state. So overall, I think the big teams, are rightful to cause that concern, but I think it's going to be, some sort of a necessary evil. I mentioned it a lot when I talk about the international break. It's a necessary evil. Yes, it's boring and people do not watch it and people do not care about it, but definitely it's a need. I mean, it's a very necessary thing. Federations pay money for those things. FIFA pays money to organize these international competitions and tournaments. It's a World Cup qualifying, process, so it should be happening to really test out the mettle of those teams before the actual competition. So I don't think that, this is a bit of exaggerated sort of thing when you talk about the international breaks, but for those big teams, I think, and in the case of Man City in particular, I think it's a bit justified when you consider the number of players they have on international duty, as well as Bayern, I would say, who are the two favourites for you to win the Champions League, and they have their whole squad pretty much on international duty. In the end, I would just say, again, international breaks are not the only place where injuries take place. They take place the whole season, and we saw that Virgil van Dijk was injured in a league. Really, if that injury happened on the international break, probably would be a lot of voices saying we should end these international breaks. But realistically speaking, they take place the whole season, and players get injured. Over the course of the season, over the course of the year, they get injured. So there's no real argument to say that we should just cut the international breaks loose because players having injuries, because they could have them all the time. I don't see the validity of that argument anyway. Ending on a transfer note from the Athletic, of course, according to reports from David Ornstein, it is Ibrahima Konate, the Leipzig centre-half, who's going to be moving to the red side of Liverpool, with Liverpool for 40 million euros. It's his release clause, fee. It's going to be paid, according to a lot of reports, pretty soon. The details are being finalised, and the player is ready to move to the Reds, in the summer. It's going to be a really interesting signing, I think, from Liverpool, considering the amount of injuries they had in that particular position at centre half, and definitely it's something worth looking at for that player, for the 21-year-old French player Ibrahima Konate, who's currently at the moment being featured in the under-21 squad in that European tournament, the under-21 for France. Of course, he joined Leipzig in 2017, and he's definitely a player that's worth looking at. I mentioned it, a lot on this show, or a couple of times at least on the show. People might be focusing with Dayot Upamecano because he's the most sought after of the two, and he's the most maybe flamboyant centre half of the two, and the most maybe sort of show off kind of centre half of the pairing. But I'm definitely interested in Ibrahima Konate because he looks and he sounds and he acts like a classic defender, to be fair. I said it a lot of times. Maybe Dayot Upamecano is the kind of defender where he wants to build the play. He wants to get the ball out from the back. He would make that long pass. He would make that short pass through the midfield. He would maybe make that extra run in set pieces. He would even venture forward sometimes to lead the attacks, the normal build from the back attacks for Leipzig. But Ibrahima Konate, in my opinion, is more of the classic defender. The defender that would, when the ball comes to him, he would just hoof it away. Whether the defender where he would win the headers with you. The defender that will be, shoulder to shoulder tackling you outside of the pitch. That is what kind of defender Ibrahima Konate is. And it's definitely proven his worth. And when you think about it, you think about the pairing of Leipzig, a 23-year-old in Dayot Upamecano and a 21-year-old for Ibrahima Konate. And not just that, like Ibrahima Konate, literally is about to make 22, so he's still in the prime of his career. Realistically speaking, that is going to be, I think, a coup for Liverpool in terms of transfer fee. But we're going to discuss this, I think, from a couple of point of views. Obviously, from the Leipzig point of view, that is another centre-half gone, and you really, I don't think that they're going to be that quick to react and to buy a centre-half unless they have another options, and I'm sure the likes of Leipzig, with the sporting director that they have in Ralf Rangnick, I would say he would have options sorted out really for a replacement centre half, either from the Red Bull system or from the or from other clubs or another options under them. That is after, of course, the loss of Dayot Upamecano to Bayern Munich. And that deal, happening and losing their most important centre-half. Now they lose their other most important centre-half, I would say, in Ibrahima Konate, who's starting to get featured even more this season with Leipzig, starting more games than usual. I mean, last season he only was starting a couple of games, really, for Leipzig. I mean, he was not playing for a while. For early on in the season, he missed a couple of games, but definitely he has, a bit of charisma about him that might suggest he is the right person to play for Liverpool. He played only 9 games in the Bundesliga, but the comparison is, and the weird situation is, he played full 6 games in the Champions League. He played 4 games in the group stages, and he played both legs in the round of 16 against Liverpool. So that might be, the time where Liverpool realised, oh, we need this guy as a centre-half for hours. That, I think, from the Leipzig point of view, is going to be a sad situation, because they're losing another centre-half of great potential in Ibrahima Konate. And again, he's another option, by the way, for France in the Euros, so that could be really, really interesting to see how it's going to be panning out. From the point of view of Liverpool, I think there's going to be a little bit of shuffling done if that deal goes through. We're talking here about a potential deal, by the way. We're not talking about a done and dusted. It's strongly reported by a lot of outlets, again, mainly The Athletic and David Ornstein, reporting that this deal is going through. So it's not really official, and until it becomes official, we will not talk about, finalized deal. But from the point of view of Liverpool, there's a lot of shuffling is going to be needed to just make this deal work. Probably one of the centre-halves that they have at the moment in Ozan Kabak, the healthy ones, really, because the main ones are injured. From Ozan Kabak, Ben Davies, Reece Williams, and Nathaniel Phillips, one of those 4 should go. And I'm suggesting that will be Ben Davies, because, he was bought for, a loan costs around £1 million or £2 million, so probably that is going to be the end of it. Probably Ben Davies is going to be returning to Preston North End, maybe, or staying as a fringe player, like ultra fringe player, really, in Liverpool. Ozan Kabak, he had a couple of bad games to start, let's face it, but he obviously was thrown at the thick of things in the Champions League. He had, a couple of good games against Leipzig, and he could be the option for the future with a healthy Virgil van Dijk for next season. But obviously, when you throw 40 million euros at Ibrahima Konate, and the report suggesting that the Liverpool board is supporting Jurgen Klopp to invest and giving him, the green light, really, to invest well in players this summer, and finally they would do that, I would say Ibrahima Konate might be the right option. But obviously, there is some serious shuffling that should be made in the Liverpool squad to get, some of these centre-halves out to give a place for Ibrahima Konate, or else there will be a problem for places, a problem for wages, and a problem for, quality of the players themselves when you don't have a particular centre. Surely with a Virgil van Dijk being healthy next season, surely Ibrahima Konate and Virgil van Dijk might just be the best centre-half pairing that they could get, and it might just be the return of Liverpool to normal competition with that centre-half pairing. Thanks for watching / listening. That's it from me for this episode. I was with HD of the PSP. Like, share, comment on this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, enable notifications to receive all the updates from these episodes of the podcast. Follow us on social media, MSR PSP on Twitter, Pitchsidepod on Instagram. Listen to us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any other platform. But most importantly, subscribe to the YouTube channel and enable notifications to receive all the updates. Until next time, I will be your boy, the HD of the PSP, and I'll see you soon.